Today, I want to talk about buying MacBooks.
Whoa,
my
shocking!
gosh, no
He's never
way.
done that before.
No, but seriously, what I want to talk about today is why I almost always buy the cheapest configuration of any of the new Macs that I review on this channel. There's a number of reasons why I do it and why you should probably do it too, if you can. So today we're going to talk about it. If you're going to buy a new Mac, you probably want to make sure it's protected with today's video sponsor, Total AV, an award-winning antivirus and malware detection service with advanced protection from online hackers and scams, such as those endlessly annoying phishing websites. You know when you go to download something and there are like 50 neon colored ads with huge buttons that are like, download some sketchy software? Yeah, those things are super annoying, but fortunately, Total AV has got your back. When you download something like that accidentally, Total AV will scan that in the cloud to avoid using system resources, and with 99.9% accuracy can detect if malware is involved, which it probably is. Total AV offers real-time protection, meaning continuous monitoring to protect you against malware, viruses, hackers, and other cyber threats. But they'll also notify you if your personal information gets leaked in a data breach. Total AV is rated excellent by customers on Trustpilot and is compatible across a wide range of personal devices. When you download Total AV, you can secure up to 3 personal devices to make sure that your mobile online banking, passwords, login, important files are secured from online threats. Right now, you can snag their impressive $19 antivirus package, which is a remarkable 80% discount from their normal rate, by checking out totalav.com/LukeMiani or heading to the link in the description below. So when you're buying a MacBook, there are, or at least there were, a lot of options to choose from. Certainly in the old Intel days, you could change everything from the processor to the graphics to the RAM to the storage. But if you've been following the channel for a little while, you may have noticed that I don't oftentimes buy the super high-spec, fully loaded machines. Now, one of the reasons that I do that is because I want to get coverage of a device at the price that it starts at. So if I'm reviewing an M1 MacBook Pro, I want to review it at that $1,300 starting price rather than take a look at a $2,000 one and say, what a great $1,300 device. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a semantic difference, but I like to experience the entry-level model and especially talk about whether or not it's a good value. However, what I want to talk about today is why buying base model Macs is such a smart idea. It's not just something that I do for YouTube reviews or to save money when I make a video. It's something that I do because it's the financially smart way to buy a Mac. Let me explain. This is the only Mac that I have bought in the last 2 or 3 years that I actually spec'd up. It's my 16-inch MacBook Pro. Now, the 16-inch starts at $2,399. This one was spec'd up to like $3,200, I think. It's the higher end configuration with the 2.3 GHz Core i9, the 8 GB Radeon Pro 550M graphics. It's got 32 GB of RAM and a 1 TB SSD. So the graphics and the RAM were the options on this thing. I didn't do the upgraded CPU and I didn't upgrade the storage. But even so, this computer costs significantly more than the base model $2,399 16-inch MacBook Pro. Now, there are a lot of people that will use a computer into the ground, that will buy something new and use it until it is basically gone 8, 9, 10 years later. However, a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people upgrade every 3 to 5 years and will sell the computer and basically trade it in for a new one. So realistically, when you buy a computer like that, which is probably the majority of people, it's kind of like buying a car, right? You're not paying the full thing and that's just it. It's gone. You do get some of the residual value of that thing back when you're done with it. And so, like with buying a car, we have to consider the residual value. That's something that I think a lot of people overlook when buying a computer. You look at an iMac and you see, okay, it starts at $1,300, that's how much it costs. But you also, just like buying a car, should maybe consider taking into account what the cost of ownership over the period of time that you plan on owning the device will actually be. And this is where it comes in handy to consider the benefits of base model Macs. So if we go back to the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, this is a computer that is still on sale right now. So depreciation hasn't really set in yet because there's no newer model for people to upgrade to. However, if you go back a few years, in this case, we'll talk about a 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro. That's about 3 years old. It's right around the point where people tend to start upgrading. Granted, 3 years is still not a super long time. People will easily own a computer for longer than that. But if we use a 3-year-old device as the benchmark for this discussion, it allows us to not really have to factor in inflation because the currency is so close that it doesn't necessarily have that much of an impact. And it also just gives us a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. So if you went on eBay right now and you bought a base model 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro, you could find those pretty easily for about $1,200, which is almost exactly 50% of its original value. So if you paid $2,400 for that in 2018, you have effectively spent $1,200 over the course of those 3 years, and you have 50% of the value remaining. However, if you went for the higher tier model with all the bells and whistles, then you would have spent $3,899, and yet those machines still sell for around $1,500 or $1,600 at best on eBay. So that means that not only are you paying a lot of money for those upgrades, but you're also paying for extra depreciation because it's only worth about 40% of its original value compared to the base model, which is worth 50%. And that's just if we're talking about the 15-inch MacBook Pros. If you bought a MacBook Air in 2018, you spent $1,000 on it then, and if you keep it in good condition, have low cycles on the battery, or at least just normal battery wear, and keep it with the box and accessories, you could pretty regularly get almost $600 for it, which is nearly 60% of its original value. So basically, the cheaper you go on the new Mac scale, not only does it become cheaper because you're spending less money, but you're getting a greater percentage of the money you spend back when you're done with the machine. Now, there are a few exceptions to this rule. The biggest one is the Mac Pro. The 2019 Mac Pro does not play by these rules because, for one, it's not old enough to have a lot of depreciation, and for two, because it's so low volume and high end that it doesn't have as broad a market as a MacBook Air, for example. So the big takeaway here is if you are someone who buys new Macs on a somewhat regular basis every couple of years and you sell your previous one to help offset the cost of the new one, you might want to take a closer look at some of those upgrades. Maybe instead of spending another $400 upgrading the SSD, you could buy an external SSD that would then carry over onto the next one, which would save you the upfront cost of adding it to the MacBook, as well as saving you from having to essentially pay for the extra depreciation that that upgrade entails. And of course, this isn't a rule that's going to apply in all cases. If you need a 16-inch MacBook Pro, then you need a 16-inch MacBook Pro. Maybe you need 2 terabytes of internal storage. That's fine. Another way that you can get around this increased depreciation is to hold your computer for more years than you ordinarily would. Because if you, let's say you lose 50% of the value over 3 years, you're not necessarily losing the same amount of value every year. The most amount of depreciation comes in the first 3 or 4 years. After that, it becomes a lot slower, so your average rate tends to flatten out if you keep a computer for 6 years compared to 3. So these are really important things that you should keep in mind if you're buying a new Mac, but I would actually say the opposite is true if you're buying a used Mac. If you're looking at a 2018 MacBook Pro for whatever reason, you should try to find the highest spec'd one for the lowest amount of money, because then at the very least when you go to sell that computer a few years later, you can advertise it as having upgrades, which will inflate the value a little bit. Like obviously the Core i9 2018 MacBook Pro with 32 gigs of RAM is worth more, albeit not by as much as when it was new, compared to the base model. So when you're buying used, go for the high spec. When you're buying new, try to go for the low spec if you can. That would basically be the TLDW of this video. I'm very curious to know what you guys think of this. Do you buy the lowest end Mac that you can, or are you someone who likes to hold a Mac for a long time and really spec it out when you buy it? So let me know all of that stuff in the comments below, and as usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.